This is Robert Capuccio. Welcome to the Self Help Antidote, a weekly dose of reason, perspective, and insight, where we challenge conventional thinking and explore authentic strategies and insights around personal transformation. Our commitment to you is to bring you some of the world's leading experts in the domains of fitness, wellness, coaching, and behavior change, separating fact from fallacy.
G'day, Tiffany. G'day, listeners. We are back. Roll with the punches and the self-help antidote. And today we are going to pontificate and probably vacillate back and forth from one subject to another. We have a lot on our mind today, and we want to share it with you.
What pontificate? What's that?
Like throw around ideas, just like kind of like explore and, do a deep dive.
Always adding to my vocabulary around you, Bobby.
Thank you. Let me pull up the exact definition of pontificate. Hold on.
I feel like I should use that word because it has my name in it. Hit us with it.
Pontificate. I was about to make a joke, but I was like, no, that's not appropriate.
I feel like I was thinking the same joke.
Oh, wait, hold on. Pontificate. Express one's opinions in a dramatic way. Yes, okay.
No, read what I Googled at the same time. Read the other word that it says.
What does it say?
It says.
Oh, in a pompous and dogmatic way.
Let's not be pompous. That's really funny.
I always thought it was like exploring ideas, and just sharing opinions on things. I didn't really know it was pompous. I do a lot of pontificating then, don't I?
That is so funny. Isn't it funny how in language, so much of our language we know the definitions of things like that, or maybe sometimes we don't, as we've just learned, but without ever going to Google to ask, it's astounding how many times I've edited a podcast and heard myself using words I haven't used before. And I'm like, oh my goodness, can I just check the definition of that? And I'm like, oh, I'm actually using that correctly, but I don't know where I learned that, just through conversations on here. All of the smart people, all of the academics and the researchers and the Harpses and the Bobbies that I speak to.
I don't know. You should be throwing me into that category. I just learned that I pontificate probably a lot more than I thought I did. Probably a lot more than I should. I didn't know there was a negative or like this disruptive or dislikable connotation to pontification.
You're quite bothered by it. I wish everyone could see your face. You're like, you've just fallen into this self-awareness rabbit hole of, oh my goodness, I'm not the way I thought I was. Has somebody told you pontificate and that's why?
No, I've always been like a self-declared pontificator. But now I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, yeah, I do obnoxiously share very strong opinions, but I'm not attached to my strong opinions. It's kind of this thing that got reinforced by Dave Rosowski, where change your opinion a minute later if you get new information or if somebody says something and you're like, yeah, you know what? That's worth consideration. But in the moment, own what you feel, own what you think, because otherwise you can't get anywhere. Like, how do you have a dynamic if you're not even sure about what your point of view is? Your point of view can be wrong. That's the thing. It's okay to have a strong point of view as long as you understand your point of view is just your point of view. It's the totality of truth in the world. And if you're willing to let go of your point of view on a new beat change, maybe not in a scene, but in life, new beat comes along. Okay, I don't have that point of view anymore. This is probably a really dumb example, but it works. The best point of view that a child could have, especially when we were growing up and, we went out and nobody could keep track of us. It's not like we had a mobile phone on us, was don't talk to strangers. That's a great point of view. 8-year-old kid has a point of view that I don't talk to strangers. That's fantastic. 8-year-old kid becomes a 28-year-old adult and is now in sales and has the point of view, I'm afraid to talk to strangers. That's a horrible point of view. It served you very well as a child. It could save your life even, but now it could destroy your career. Let it go. Martin Rooney, we both had him on the show. Good friend. Love Martin. He had a great example about life being a journey. And you're going on this journey, but it's analogous to the forest. And you're walking through the forest and you have all your tools and you're dragging this raft behind you. And the raft's really heavy. But now you come to this rapids, this stream. There's no way you can cross it. And the only way to get across, because it's really important, right? So that journey across the forest is analogous to a life journey that's critical to where you want to be, where you need to be. You jump in that raft and you sail that raft down the rapids, down the river, and then you get to the other side and you get out. And it's like, wow, that raft really helped me. I wouldn't be where I am today had I not had a raft. So you're going to take that raft with you everywhere. But now you're dragging the raft over rocks. It's getting stuck in between trees. You got to stop and twist it and yank it. You're moving at about 10% the speed and efficiency that you would move without the raft. But you don't let go because it's like, well, this raft got me to where I was. But where you were was in an environment where the raft was perfect. Now you're in an environment, the raft has now become a liability. Let go of the raft, and we don't let go of the raft. We don't let go of that job or that failed business or those business partners that we don't want to talk about. We don't let go of any of those things. And we have all these pontifications around what that means.
That's a really good analogy. So you got on the call and we talked for about 15 minutes and it was gold. I wish I had hit record at the start, and I was like, let's just have this whole conversation on here. And we are.
Me moaning about my bin, the bin.
Yeah, look, maybe not that part. That wasn't super enlightening for anybody. But our starting point for the conversation was weirdly the idea of manifestation, which I've talked about before, both in solo episodes and other episodes. But I think it leads into an interesting conversation when we're kind of mulling over the idea of, or the perspective of manifestation. What is it, and what are people try and attempt to portray it as, and what really might it be? Mm-hmm. Which is, again, like as I'm saying that, I'm so hyper aware that I almost was, and I probably still said it like my version of what I'm going to talk about is the way it is. And it's like, no, you're just a version. So let me share my perspective on manifestation. Like I said to you, is that like I believe that there are repercussions to having an awareness on or some sort of a relationship with the idea of manifestation, but I think people tend to sell it as some magical thing that you just think inside your head and the rest of the world does the work and then it falls into your lap. Whereas I think that
reality warping, in other words. Reality warping.
Yes, reality warping. Whereas I think that when you have an intention, it's red car theory. When you buy a red car, all of a sudden you see all the red cars on the road that you didn't see before. Well, they were still there, you just didn't see them. So when you decide that you want to manifest a thing, all of a sudden your energy and your attention is on the thing. What is it? The RAS system, the reticular activating system in our brains that looks out for the thing that we're focusing on, that starts going off. So we see opportunities. We're excited about the idea of manifestation. It has this really positive connotation. We're never looking to manifest a bad thing. We're either trying to manifest money or a relationship or a job or an opportunity, a way forward, right? So we're excited and we look out and then we jump on that opportunity because we see it and we're like, oh my goodness, it's the universe. I better jump on this, and we take action. So I think that it's great to have a relationship with it. I just don't like seeing people make it into something magical and then sell it to people. Sell it, because people with really big profiles end up selling these manifestation courses. And I mean, they're manifesting their money off the idea that this thing works. I don't know.
Yeah. When I was part of one of these self-help organizations, and I was apprenticing under this teacher, and just going through his courses, eventually participating and teaching at these courses. And I remember a couple of people were standing up and talking about manifestation. And it's like, I've written this book and it's sold this many copies, and I'm speaking here and I'm doing this. And when you listen to their story, a couple of times I was like, yeah, before I wrote my book, I was living in a basement apartment. Nothing was wrong with living in a basement apartment, but it was like, I could barely get by. I had no money. I wasn't making rent. And I was like, wait a minute. Hold on. And everyone's applauding because they're getting what the person's saying, but they're not looking underneath. I'm like, you were broke and could not get by even until you started writing books about success to
before
teach
you'd achieved it.
People. And then by selling those books, you got yourself out. Is everybody hearing this? And it's like, well, what does it matter how he got? I was like, okay, I was a failing heart surgeon. 1, because I never went to medical school. 2, because everyone I ever did heart surgery on died a horrible and avoidable death. And I was living in a basement apartment. But then I started writing books teaching surgeons my methodology of surgery, which, by the way, has never worked. Every single patient has died. And then I became rich. And now I travel around the world and I teach surgeons everywhere. The survival rate has plummeted, but I'm doing incredibly well. And I drive a beautiful car. It's like, wait a minute, hold on. There's something really off there. And it's like, and not, people get very, very upset when I say this because we love Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. It's a great book. I love that book. But the truth of the matter is Napoleon Hill got rich writing Think and Grow Rich, where there wasn't something that he was super successful in prior to that. And there's not a lot of hard evidence that he was ever commissioned by Andrew Carnegie to study the most successful people in the world. And like that really upsets a lot of people. But I think when you're teaching, here's the thing, when you're teaching, you have a higher level of responsibility. And you have to be evidence-based. I'm not really even talking about empirical evidence, because let's say you're someone who is an entrepreneur and there's a certain system that you've utilized that wasn't based on empirical evidence, but over the past 10 years, it's worked for you in your business. And when you bring on new employees and you bring on new managers, that system duplicates beyond you. It doesn't need you to manage it. It scales. Well, if you teach that, even though that is your personal system and your personal experience, there's still evidence to support that. Like, I've done this. And I think it's extraordinarily important that we have that sense of responsibility, because if somebody's coming in, it's almost like if you're an artist and someone's buying tickets to your show, you're enriching their life and your talent is contributing something of value. But you are there at that show by permission of the people who have bought the tickets. Because if they didn't buy tickets, you wouldn't have a show and you would never get to share your art. So when somebody comes in and they're in your audience, you're only getting to do what it is you do because they've allowed you to do it. And I think that there has to be a strong sense of responsibility and value add. But in your own life, I think being open and experimenting, measured openness and experimentation. I think it's like, okay, I'm going to take my life savings and I'm just going to, give all that away so I can try this manifestation thing. Well, that's really risky. Maybe you can start a little bit smaller. But when we talk about manifesting, we're not just talking about magical thinking. A lot of times we're talking about something that does have a lot of evidence. We're talking about your belief in yourself. We're talking about your identity. Like, even we brought up Carol Dweck on this show before. Carol Dweck, a growth mindset, if you want to think about it, it could be considered a form of manifestation. Because people with a growth mindset, when they encounter setbacks and trials and it becomes difficult, remember, what do they have a proclivity for? Learning. It's like, wow, this is really hard. I'm learning a lot. And it increases their confidence, and they'll persevere much further than someone with a fixed mindset who thinks that the challenge or the trial that they're going through is a reflection of who they are. Even more damaging, it's a reflection of who I am not. Where someone with a growth mindset will keep going and going. And if you try more things, just by probability, you're going to succeed more of the time. It's like, well, I'm such a manifester. I had this problem and I manifested a different outcome. Yeah, but your belief in learning allowed you to persevere and maybe even in the midst of challenge, get a little bit of joy and bliss because you're living out something that you strongly value. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Well, you're making me think. It's interesting. I had a conversation with my client yesterday after training. We were talking, and we ended up talking about meaning. What is meaning? Which was really, really interesting because the night before, when I went to bed, I was thinking about some future ideas for future solo episodes that I wanted to unpack, and I wrote down on the notebook beside my bed, I wrote down 3 sentences about meaning. Like meaning, what is it? How do we make it? What does it mean? Kind of just, I can't remember the exact questions, but I really went down this little thought tangent. I thought I'll write that down because I want to come back to that. And it was weird that my client was the one who brought up meaning in our conversation. And I was like, oh, how weird. But then I was going for a walk yesterday and I was thinking about, like I was processing, we have this life experience and all of this stuff happens and we're trying to control all of the things. But at the end of the day, we're this biological, physical bag of fucking whatever this is that makes us up, carrying around this thinking mind, this mind that is making meaning on everything. And kind of in one respect, all it comes down to is how do I think and interpret, and then what behaviors do I make choices around, which give me access, which turns the right switches on in my brain to emit the right neurochemistry so that I get great levels of serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin and, because that's what it comes down to. My life experience every day is how I feel. How do I feel? Do I feel relaxed? Do I feel excited? Do I feel driven to succeed? And all of the things that we choose to do are things that can elicit one or some of those. So if we choose a relationship or a friendship, it is the oxytocin and the connection and the things that we get from that experience. So we spend some time on that, and then we go and do things to achieve, to get our reward centers fired, to experience dopamine. Some of us, like myself, like the excitement of risk and reward. So I like to do things like boxing, or I like to do things in my working life that create a little bit of fear and anxiety to overcome. And then the overcoming of that drives me. It's just interesting because I look at that and go, there's so many ways you can live life that could look completely different to the life you're living, and you could still experience those things. Like, it's how we understand the meaning.
How you feel and how you interpret your situation dictates how you respond to it. And how you respond to it, you're putting out a direct cause and effect relationship. So one of these things is around parties. So I have hated parties for more. I mean, I can go to a work party and just find a group of people. There's a context around it. As long as because I'm a little bit socially awkward. Like, me making small talk is painful, not just for me, but for the person who I'm trying to talk to. I just don't engage with it very well. But if we're talking about neurobiology, if we're talking about coaching or training, okay, now there's a framework. I feel right at home. But for the longest time, I hated going to parties because when I used to go to parties as a kid, they were horrible. they were a place of humiliation and ridicule. I mean, for a physically deformed kid with facial deformities, walking into a room, albeit even a dark room, in front of tons of people, and probably people drinking alcohol way earlier than we should have been, let's be fair, it is the worst environment. You're going to have things said to you. There's going to be experiences that make that party, well, let's just say not fun. But then later in life, I could walk into a room, into a party with someone, and I will walk out of that party thinking that was a waste of an evening and I should have never went. And like the people there were absolutely rude, and they basically were standoffish. They weren't friendly. Same person I rocked up to the party with walks out going, that was amazing. I had the time of my life. Wow, I can't wait to be around these people again. We're in the same room having two totally different experiences. And how much of that is me as an adult, no longer physically deformed? Somebody comes up to me, strike up a conversation. Oh, what do you do? And all of a sudden I'm uptight and I'm weird and I'm anxious. And they're like, oh, this person doesn't want to talk. So they're probably on the way home going, yeah, like I met that guy, Bobby. Wow, he's horrible. He's not friendly at all. And I met that person. I was like, I tried to talk to that person. They weren't friendly. I was like, we're all in the same room and we're walking out of there with completely different experiences. We are manifesting outcomes because of our subconscious responses, and we're not even aware of it, because we're almost like that photographer taking a picture of a landscape. You look at that going, wow, that's amazing. But you're only seeing about 5% of what the photographer sees. What you see is what that photographer focused on, whether they chose to focus on it or something drew their attention to that particular part of the landscape. If you were there with the photographer taking that photo, you wouldn't see what's in the photograph. You would see everything else that's not there, which is immense and expansive by comparison. So if you have a system or a philosophy that changes the way you engage with life and it produces a result, that's worth experimenting with.
I know that when you remember me last year sometime, or probably longer now, talking about not sparring anymore and not boxing anymore, because I'd been on this podcast talking to people about concussion and brain trauma, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I feel comfortable with that. I don't want to do that anymore. I wasn't doing a lot of boxing at the time, and then I really missed it, and then I remember weighing up what else did boxing represent to me, and I was like, what's what, like when I step away, if I had to step away from training and boxing and sparring, then I'm also stepping away from what was for me quite intimate connections with people, a level of intimacy that I don't get from other places, a level of being seen, that for me I experience quite differently. And I was like, what's worse? What's worse, disconnection or the odd light tap of the old frontal lobe? But it was, well, you got to choose you got to choose which one is the most. I decided to choose which one's most important to me. I don't get punched in the head all that much.
But that's a very important question that people need to ask themselves about any arena that they step into, whether that's fighting or performing or being an entrepreneur. What am I getting out of this thing that I love so much? I mean, think about an athlete, right? Where sport is everything to me. My identity is rooted in who I am as an athlete, what position I play. And then I get hurt. And I get hurt to the degree where I can't go back to my sport. So if my identity is I am the sport I play and now I can't play the sport, well, who am I? And next thing you know, you have someone who is in the middle of a brutally painful life crisis and they don't know who they are. And a question is, well, what was it about sport that made me love it so much and give my life to it? Because there are other avenues, because it wasn't the sport. And yes, it was the sport, but it wasn't. It's what the sport gave you. Like people say, well, no, nobody wants more money. And everyone's like, well, I don't know. If given the choice, I take more, not less. So I think I want more money. It's like, well, what would you do with more money? Okay, let's examine that. So for some people, what you really want is to be safe and you want to be secure and you want that for your family. Other people, you want freedom. It's freedom you're looking for. I think when you understand the motives and you start to understand the value that's represented, it gives you a lot, not only a lot more choices in life, but a lot more resilience. For me, I love the performing arts when I first saw them, but for a lot of reasons, I was like, I can't go in that direction. But I became a speaker. I got to share my innermost thoughts. I got to share my talents and my skills with people in a way that connected me to them. I think Amy, Amiede, my wife, when she was getting a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Stevens Institute at the Plaza Hotel in New York. Wow, this is going back less than a year ago, but I remember what she said. And you had all of these incredibly successful people up there, and they were very impressive. She got the most amount of people talking to her after she had gotten up and given her acceptance speech, because the one thing she said was, Art, I see me in you and you see you in me. And it's just that. And by doing that, you see you. By you seeing you in me, you're also seeing you and understanding you. And I think that's beautiful. It's like art enables people to be seen by themselves and by others in ways that are not possible. Well, how many ways could you do that? You could do that in speaking. You could do that leading a team in an accounting firm. There are so many ways to do that. So if for whatever reason, this doesn't work out for you, what are your choices now? Because now you understand the motivation behind them.
I was on the phone yesterday to a person who we've been on a call a few times recently. They went from running their own business to taking on an exciting role, and then running into some personal challenges. And then they're looking at, so they rang me, and when I rang them back, we had this big conversation. They're getting a new business, or they're at the sign on the dotted line point of taking over a small business again with the view to turn it into something. A really great opportunity came up in something really unique that they won't give away too much information, obviously. They were exploring some really unique idea. Like when they said, I used to have a passion for this, I'm thinking of doing this. And I was like, is that even a thing? Wow, that is really, A, I would have never expected you to say that. And B, that's really interesting. Then they found somebody was actually selling out of running one of these businesses. So they're about to sign on the investment into doing it. And it was really interesting because it was a phone call of kind of excitement. And I felt like almost they were asking me something, but not definitely. It was, so I was like, what is it that it was like there was something they needed certainty on or clearing? And I was thinking about it later and how often, and we do this, and I learned a very big, almost accidental but kind of deliberate lesson in 2020 with it. And that was because I took a huge leap into going into business. And what we do is we want to know that we want the certainty that this thing will work. Tell me, what if this thing doesn't work? It has to work. I'm going to do this and it has to work. And in 2020, I remember thinking I'll be 1 in 4, I'll be 25% of the business, but in terms of investing at that level, I'm the small guy. So it's going to take a lot of my capital, it's going to take all of what I have to give, which is, everything for me. And it's not everything for the other parties. It's just a very small thing for them. So I was very aware of that. And the thing that I mulled over is, if this doesn't work, I have said this before, so if anyone's listening again, sorry. But I said to myself, if this goes balls up and I lose everything and I go bankrupt on everything I've worked for the last 30 something years, will I learn enough or change enough for this to be worthwhile? And can I make amends with everything, the rug being pulled out from under me, and know that I will be satisfied with either a change or a learning? And I said yes to that. So I mulled that over and I went, yep, let's do this. And then when 2020 came and COVID came and it shut our gyms down and I went, oh, well, obviously I didn't think it was going to be this. It wasn't going to look like this, but I've answered that question. So I didn't have to, I made friends with the worst case scenario and then moved on. It was almost, instead of saying, what if this doesn't work, in a throwaway kind of anxious way, why don't we say, now, if this doesn't work, what's the benefit, or what's the opportunity, or what's the exciting thing? And I think that, I mean, it's kind of the same question, but it's a very different question, isn't it?
I think it's a question that prepares you for multiple realities ahead, because we do have that control-based mentality, not me and you. I'm saying we as a big portion of our society, like, I'm going to make this work. And that's very helpful sometimes. But there are things that are outside of your control. Like talking about self-help, they're like, well, everything that happens to you, you created it. You could say your response to it is within your control. But saying that, I mean, I've had conversations with people that think everything from plane crashes to car accidents to unforeseeable events were created by you. And it's like, okay, that goes back into not only magical thinking, that goes into, okay, I'm a reality warping super telepath out of Marvel Comics. I think that's absurd, especially when somebody tries everything that they could possibly try. You go all into a gym and COVID happens. Like, you didn't create a global pandemic, nor did you create the response of 70 different governments around the world to that situation. And for someone to sit there and suggest that you did, that's not only suggesting that you have a level of power that there is zero evidence for. That's a cruel statement. That's a shitty thing to say to somebody. And I think that there's always that chance that you can do everything right. And what you think is going to happen is not going to happen for a variety of reasons that you probably can't even appreciate. And if that doesn't happen, preparing yourself for that, like you said, making friends with that outcome, I think that affects things like, how long does it take you to recover? Because it's going to hurt. It's not like, oh, you'll just bounce. I've made friends with the outcome. Next. No, you're human. But how fast you rebound, how resilient you are. And resilience can be defined in and of itself as having those things happen to you and your ability to return back to your original level of functionality, or maybe even grow as a result of it. Mm. So you return back to a higher level of functionality. That's resilience. So those questions make you resilient. And resilience is critical because shit is going to happen to you. And a lot of times we default to grit, which definitely has its place. Absolutely. But there's other factors that need to come into play. And one of those is preparation in advance, having a plan. What's your plan B? I remember I was consulting for a major company out in the UK and Europe. And one of the lead educators that I was working with had this thing like, I will make this. There was never a contingency plan. And I know a lot of people advocate that. Don't have a contingency plan because that's a way out. No, it doesn't mean that you're not going to do the thing that you said you're going to do. It just means that sometimes things do happen and you're not going to do it in the way you thought you were going to do it. It's almost cliche. Everyone's heard this example that 3M was a mining company. So they've changed their trajectory as an organization quite a bit. And that story about the scientist who was working on an adhesive glue that would never come apart. It would be this super adhesive glue that they would market. And it was such a failure, but it became the Post-it note. which turned out to be a massive commercial success. Because before that, you had to staple shit to absolutely everything. Or, I mean, if you were a complete savage, if you were the other type of person, you would tape everything, which was time consuming, but that's how life works. You need tape. But once you get that innovation from 3M, if they were like, nope, that's it, we're going back to the drawing board, we're going to create that adhesive glue, they might have had a series of failures, things that they couldn't even market. But because they're like, okay, how do we use this? How do we think differently in this situation? Did 3M give up on their corporation? Did they not have grit? Did they lack some moral virtue? No, they were innovative because they were open. They implemented design thinking and they changed the world. I mean, they didn't change the world the way that, like, okay, somebody who cures cancer would change the world. But I love Post-it notes. Thank you for that.
I think also, I think there's a lot when I look at me and how I function and operate and what I achieve and what I don't achieve and how that has looked and felt from both an inside perspective, as much as I can have perspective from that standpoint, and an outside perspective, as much as I can try and have perspective from that standpoint as well. But making things work, like, and being and understanding, like I said to you before, there was a situation that I was in quite some time ago and I made the choice to walk away from that, to cut my losses and walk away from a situation. And I realized recently that I have very much held a victim mentality over that festers in me, in the way that I think about it, or sometimes react to things that in relation to how I feel about it. And I realized that, and I was like, that is a victim, because actually that was a choice I made, and it was the optimal choice. It was the positive choice. It was the thing that I chose over the two options, and one was really not great. And nothing's always going to be perfect. And I look at the choices I make now and the work I do now, and I'm not where I want to be. I'm not where I want to be. Like, I love what I do, but I'm not where I want to be. But when I look at why I'm not where I want to be, I could be there, but I'm making choices every day about what I am and am not willing and comfortable and wanting to do. And it's about understanding that everything's a choice. And this can sound brutal to a lot of people and to me, of course, but when we work in an environment or a job, or stay in a relationship that is harming us, that is making us capitulate, that's a choice. And it doesn't mean that the other choices aren't terrifying and frightening and have consequences, but we have a choice. They just can be difficult choices to make. Does that make sense? Like, oh, I can't leave this toxic workplace because I need to pay the bills. Yes, because you value. So you choose. I choose to have this job that does also have negative consequences, because I choose to have a roof over my head. And we forget to be grateful for that part. I don't know if this sounds too, I don't mean it to sound as brutal as it probably comes across.
I think there's a lot of truth to this.
I think there's value in adopting a level of that thinking.
See, here's the thing. Yes, and I'm always talking about paradox. Yes, that is true. You chose this. You can choose a different response and facilitate a different outcome. Yet someone whose brain has been rewired by early childhood abuse, and they go into abusive relationships in an intent to reconcile things that cannot be changed in the past, and they don't even realize they're doing this. Now they're in a situation where they truly believe if they leave, they or someone else that they care about will be harmed. I have a very hard time going, well, you chose this, make a different decision.
No, I 100% agree with what you're saying, but I also feel that you can have a level of self-compassion and understanding why that choice is being made within your nervous system and your unconscious mind. So it's for me, it was understanding even just the words or framing of the thoughts in my head when I thought about a situation. It was like, that's not great for me to be telling myself that story, framing myself that way, right? Some of those, for me, some of the choices I've made have been because of and triggered in me like a trauma response due to how they relate to other experiences I've had. So the choice I was referring to earlier of walking away from something was one of those choices. So it was, okay, I'm drawn into this and I didn't realize this situation I was in, and it reflects to me almost a reenactment of a traumatic situation I've been in before. And I didn't know it while I was in there for a long time. So I understand that I chose to be in it, but then I chose to get out of it. But now I've got to choose years and years and years down the track. I've got to choose to recognize that I am holding on to the way I talk about and think about that experience. And it hasn't been in a positive way.
And that self-awareness creates the possibility to start taking steps forward. There's something that, I've always pushed back on, and it's my problem. It's a growth edge that I've needed to work on, and that's self-compassion. And we've talked about that. I struggle. I've always thought when people are like, oh my God, self-care and self-compassion, it's the constant conversation. Well, at what point does that cross over to self-indulgence? And the degree that your life
Don't worry, you're in no danger of crossing over that anytime soon, Bobby.
And I've been examining how much pain I've not only caused because here's the thing, the more, this is a general belief that I have. This is my point of view, and this is what I've experienced in my life. The more something is about me, and I wake up thinking about me and my career and what I'm doing and what I want to succeed in, the more pain and suffering and struggle I'm going to have. And the more I wake up and go, okay, how can I be of value? And I make my life about other people, the more joy I'm going to get, the greater resilience, the more I'm going to bounce back from setbacks because it's not about me in the first place. And self-compassion is what you do when you're not making it about you. And that's what I've had such a hard time understanding, because here's the thing, where on the one hand, I believe that there are certain degrees of trauma and types of trauma that cause people to not even be aware of the decisions they're making. So to say like you chose that, no. I don't think free will is wide and as deep as we think it is. Not saying I don't believe in free will. I do, but I do not believe it as being this immutable fact of life. And that there is more and more emerging empirical evidence to support this, that we as a society hang on to almost free will as a dogma. On the other hand, right? Because if that's true, what else do I believe is true? What you're talking about, you didn't make a bad decision. And it's like, I made a bad decision. I chose this. No, you made, listening to your story earlier, a courageous and good decision at the time it was made, given the information you had. Mm-hmm. Now, if it went upside down because of COVID, how could you have predicted COVID? I mean, if you could have predicted COVID, well, then you have a much higher level of responsibility because you're like Nostradamus. You can see into the future. And why did you not tell anyone about COVID so we could have been better prepared? That's another thing. So it's kind of like, no, you made a very good decision that didn't work out, because it's like, oh, I make bad decisions. I chose this, and that's not helpful. It's kind of helpful if I guess you went on drugs and stole your neighbor's jewelry to buy crystal meth. Yeah, you chose that. You got to really do some work on yourself. That was hurtful to someone who didn't deserve to have that done because you were having an issue. However, on the other hand, you went into the business at the wrong time, maybe with the wrong people, based on information you could not have. A reasonable person would not have expected you to know that. So what's the next decision? And this used to come up in the gym. Oh my God, when I was in sales, And I used to go absolutely mental, not on people, inside myself. And then I would very casually explain this when I saw salespeople respond to, well, I joined another gym. Oh my God. And I trained there for like 6 weeks. I quit and that was a horrible experience. And well, what was the name of the gym? Oh, it was XYZ gym. Oh, that's one of our competitors, and it's like, yeah, everybody says that, that's why, as a matter of fact, many of our happy members here today used to be members at Club XYZ. Would you like me to tell you a few reasons why? And for me, I was like, no, please don't. And don't ever put down Club XYZ or any club, because listen to what you just said to this person. Yeah, thank heavens you're here because you did make a shit decision. That's a horrible gym. You just convinced that person that they do not have the wherewithal to make a competent decision about where they train. And they have failed in the past, and you supported that. So you very well-meaningly reinforced this person's fear. How do I know I'm not making another bad decision today? A better approach would probably be, if you really think your competitors suck, go visit your competitors and find anything that doesn't suck. So the next time someone comes in and says, yeah, I joined Club XYZ and man, it didn't work out for me. I had a horrible experience. It's like, wow, that's so unfortunate. I can understand why you would join that gym. I've been there myself, and the front desk is very inviting, and they do have this equipment line. And, walking through that gym myself, I've actually had that thought. I would actually join here if I was looking for a place outside of my work to train. So, because what you basically did is said, okay, let's reframe this. Given the information you had, you didn't make a horrible decision. Do you mind if I ask, what were your expectations when you joined the gym, and what actually happened that was disappointing? That's a much more honest conversation. And now you're increasing that person's feeling of openness and efficacy. You are far more likely to lead them to making a decision within your facility. It works better for the guest. It works better for you. But we do that shit to ourselves all the time. And it's really not useful.
So true. Got any closing comments? I reckon we should wrap it up. We're not good at doing shorties, are we?
We're not.
Oh. Bobby Cappuccio.
So, yeah. Anyway, we're not good at doing wrap-ups. I don't think the open, we just ease into the opening, and we just like banter our way into the middle. But the wrap-up seems to be really awkward. So we wind up just doing this awkward, abrupt, yeah, all right, see you later. Thank you, Tiff. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, listener. Listener's like, oh, okay, that feels a little bit weird. That felt like, I don't know, that's a date that's just gone really wrong.
People are just starting to get deep and philosophical, and we just rip the Band-Aid off and go. And they're like, whoa, okay, they've gone. See you later.
And that's what happens when you listen to podcasts where the Tourette's guy's a co-host. So, yeah, my closing comments are: compassion is kindness, and self-compassion is kindness not only to you, it's kindness to other people. Because who you become when you are constantly self-loathing stops you from learning. It stops you from impacting people in a more positive way. It stops you from getting back on track. It stops you from being resilient. And it's like, when you think about who you would want to be around, what are all the attributes and the characteristics that would describe that person? When you are beating yourself up and hating yourself, how much does your personality traits align with the hypothetical person you just created in your mind that you would want to be around? There's probably some incongruencies. So, if you're going to make life not about you, and I can't tell you to do that, I'm just saying in my experience, that's where I have felt the deepest joy and the least suffering. You have to be compassionate with you if you're going to make it not about you.
Well said, my friend. Well said. Thank you.
I will see you next week, Tiffany, when I am jet lagged and sloppy all over again.
I cannot wait. Farewell. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Visit us at theselfhelpantidote.com to share your feedback, insights, and recommendations on what topics you'd like us to explore in the future.